It was one fine morning at Knapford Station as I puffed my little yellow into the station. Once I entered inside the track, I parked my engine next to the platform as I was ready to seize the day. As I waited patiently while humming a merry tune, I saw my boss, well, we call him the Fat Controller, exited from his office as he walked towards me with a big smile. "Good morning, Rebecca," he chirped. "Good morning, sir," I replied happily. "How are you?" "Well, I'm ready to start the day," he chuckled as he then cleared his throat and spoke seriously. "Now, Rebecca, as you know, Gordon isn't feeling well, as he had a sore stomach, and I need you to pull the express for both day and night." I did remember that Gordon was feeling sick, as I felt pity for him, as he didn't sleep well, as he kept groaning in agony of his pain. Me and the others tried to tell him that he should get some rest, but being the stubborn type he was, he refused, as he assured us that he would be all right to do his job. However, I knew too well that he wasn't all right, as I kept trying to convince him that if he gets some rest for today, he would be better by tomorrow. Thankfully, Gordon took my advice, as he thanked me and went to get some sleep. As I remember, the Fat Controller then asks, "Do you think you could do his tasks?" Oh, when he asked my question, I immediately lost my confidence, as I'll admit, I hadn't done the Midnight Express as much, and I haven't been on this railway as long as Gordon. I wasn't so sure that I was just as capable as any workers on this railway. With that, I kept rubbing my shoulder as I kept looking around, trying to gain my confidence while frowning. With my boss noticing my lack of faith in myself, he gave me a gentle smile. "Don't worry, Rebecca. You did fine at other times, and I'm pretty sure that nothing will go wrong." Just hearing his kind voice made me smile a bit as I looked at him. "Thanks, sir." I thanked him as I slowly but surely gained my confidence. "You're welcome, Rebecca," he replied. "Now, Thomas will fetch the express coaches right away." With that, he headed back to his office as I took a deep breath. I know that I had done the Midnight Express a couple of times, but I only had done it with Gordon, and now that was my first time doing this alone. Just that thought now made me feel a bit queasy as I tried to assure myself that I could do it. I was usually the optimistic type that liked to take new challenges, but doing something very important made me feel a bit anxious, as I had a massive fear of failing others. I didn't want to let anyone down, especially Gordon, as not only he worked on the railway for years, but I also started to grow fond of him. I was aware he can be pompous and grumpy, but he was sensible, caring, strong, and honest, and he would do anything to show how capable he was with his job. Well, I'll admit, ever since the incident about a month ago when Gordon was teaching me how to pull the express and an accident occurred, he became more open and admitted his flaws, which gave me shock at first, but knowing how much he changed in many ways made me feel happy, as I knew he was truly a very caring person. All of this made my feelings for him grow stronger, as I admired his bravery while I was the somewhat an awkward type of person. As I thought about my memories of Gordon, I blushed in a faint shade of pink as I tried to focus on my job. Just as my thoughts were all over the place, I heard a familiar whistle and a voice. "Here's the express, Rebecca!" This made my eyes wide with surprise, as I gasped in surprise. There, I looked behind to see Thomas in his blue tank engine with the number 1 on the sides. There, I wasted no time as I put on my big smile and waved. "Thank you, Thomas!" I thanked him politely. With that, Thomas smiled back as he reversed his engine while I waited patiently for the passengers to enter inside the express coaches. I didn't mind waiting, as I had plenty of time to gain my composure, so I could seize the day and do the Midnight Express properly. As I waited, I took a deep breath again. "You can do this, Rebecca. You've been here for months now, and you got this," I spoke to myself as I slowly gained my confidence. As I did some self-positive thinking, I heard the coaches were being coupled from behind as the guard blew his whistle loudly. With the signal cue, I wasted no time as I put on a cheery smile and tooted my engine's whistle happily. There, I slowly puffed outside the station, and I was now ready to get through to the day. To amuse myself, I shouted at the top of my lungs proudly, "Express coming through!" While I was puffing down the track to Vickerstown, I heard some birds singing a beautiful song and saw that all the flowers had blossomed. Just seeing the beauty of nature had me forget about my worries and my insecurities, as I now appreciating on what the day has to offer. I was also helped by the feeling the cool breeze hitting my skin as I sighed happily. Perhaps today was going to be a good day as usual, as I knew that paranoia was just playing tricks on me, as I knew well that I was a reliable worker. However, as I arrived at my destination, something went wrong, as when I pulled my brakes, my engine's wheels began to slip as it causes the coaches to jolt forward and back a bit roughly. This made me gasp in horror, as when I was fully parked at the station, I popped my head as soon as some passengers rubbing some dust off their clothes, as I heard some grumbling from some angry passengers. I honestly thought everything was going to go smoothly, but it turns out that it wasn't the case as my wheels slipped. I'll admit, my engine wasn't that perfect, but I'd never been in an accident before, as I assumed that my engine was all good. As I watched all the passengers leaving, I blushed on a light shade of red in embarrassment and guilt as I gritted my teeth while trying to make a fake smile. However, as I waited, I swore that I heard some passengers were making horrible comments that said, "This is the worst ride ever," or "Does this worker know what she's doing?" or "I will never go on the express again if this happens." All these negative comments made me gasp as my eyes went wide. I felt terrible for the passengers, as I didn't want to make anyone feel angry or upset. I was always the type to try to make others feel happy or feel good about themselves. However, I decided to push these hurtful words aside, as I knew that nobody was hurt, and I knew that everyone makes mistakes once in a while, even though I didn't like making any mistakes, as it made me feel like I was worthless as a worker or as a person in general. However, I used one of my strategies to cope myself. "Don't worry, it's just a little mistake you made. Everyone makes mistakes and it's okay." Later in the afternoon, I was once again pulling the express, but this time I was heading back to Knapford Station. I didn't have any incidents after my engine's wheel slipped back at Vickerstown in the morning. This made me feel relieved, as I felt happy and outgoing as usual, as I greeted some workers whenever I went past them. It felt so good that the rest of the day went swimmingly, as I hummed to a merry tune while pulling the express. I knew that my boss would be proud of me, and I knew that Gordon would be proud too for me doing my job alone, despite it having such a hectic day. However, as I headed to Wellsworth Junction, I noticed a faulty signal as I spotted Henry while pulling some trucks. When I spotted him, I gasped in absolute fear as my heart began to pound violently as Henry was heading straight towards me. Then I screamed, "Henry, watch out!" With that, Henry popped his head out as he gasped, "Rebecca!" There, we both put our brakes for our engines as Henry stopped his engine on time. But for me, I wasn't so lucky as my engine's wheels began to slip once again. But this time, it slipped so badly that by the time my engine came to a complete stop, both my engine and the express coaches jolted violently as I fell to the ground. This got me stunned for a few seconds before I shook my head as I panted. There, I spotted Henry running towards me and he asked, "Are you okay?" However, when I tried to respond, I felt like my voice was trapped as I couldn't stop shaking badly as my heart felt like it sunk to my stomach. I knew I was having a massive panic attack as I couldn't think straight, as I couldn't stop shaking to my running core. As Henry tried to support me, I heard some passengers shouting in anger as they said this is such a disaster. They were right as the signal was broke, but when I stopped making rude comments about me, this caused me to cover my face with my hands as I tried to ignore all those words and tried to regulate myself, but with no success. With this all occurring, I had this one question in my mind. Was I in trouble? That evening, I was sent home by the Fat Controller as he instructed Edgeworth to fetch Rocky to collect my engine and to be examined, as I did explain that my engine's wheels did slip. Going all the way home, I felt empty inside as I tried to block all these negative feelings. But this only made me feel worse. Even though I wasn't in trouble, I couldn't help but feel guilty that I didn't stop my engine safely, even though the circumstances was dangerous. Once I arrived home, the Fat Controller looked at me with a small frown as he spoke. "I'm so sorry that this happened to you, Rebecca, but until then, you can't work until your engine is all sorted." When I heard that, I looked down as I felt some tears were building. I tried not to cry as I tried to remain professional as possible. I knew that the Fat Controller had noticed my facial expression as he explained, "James will do the Midnight Express, and I can assure you that it wasn't your fault, and no passengers are seriously injured." Even though he tried to comfort me, this didn't make me feel any better as I looked at him and replied somberly as I bid him good night. Thank you, sir. Have a good night. With that, the Fat Controller bid me good night back as he hopped inside his blue car and drove off. Once he was out of sight, I looked at the door intensely as a few tears managed to escape from my yellow eyes. I tried so hard to move on, but I couldn't as I feel a huge amount of remorse from the brake accident. However, after I stood there for a minute, I walked slowly to the door as I opened the door carefully. Once I entered inside, I prayed that no one would notice me, as I just wanted to be in my room all alone, and I had no one to ask so many questions on what happened today. However, this wasn't the case as I spotted a person who ran towards me as he cried, "Rebecca! Thank goodness that you're all right! I overheard the accident was nearly disastrous." I knew that Percy was such a kind person, but when he mentioned about the incident, I went quiet as a mouse, as I decided to continue to go towards the stairs so I could go to my room. I knew that I might have hurt Percy's feelings, but at that point, I just felt so awful that all I wanted to do was to avoid anyone so I could be all alone. As I headed upstairs, I spotted Emily, who looked at me with a big frown of concern as she asked if I was all right. Again, I didn't respond. Once I got upstairs, I decided to dart to my room, which is at the far left, and it was next to Gordon's. Once I got to my room, I slammed the door shut at this point. I couldn't contain all my emotions as I ran to my yellow bed and lied with my face buried on the pillow. There, I began to sob as I felt so terrible. This was one of the worst days I ever have, and it was the worst near accident that occurred. I thought I was the worst person ever as I couldn't stop my brakes properly and caused some passengers to get hurt. After I cried for what I had felt like forever, I began to feel weary, and as my now teary red yellow eyes began to feel heavy, I didn't care to get changed into comfortable clothes as I felt so bad. With that, I allowed my eyes to close shut as I began to fall asleep. However, before I fell asleep, I swore that on the other side of the door, I heard some muffles coming from Percy, Thomas, Emily, Nia, and even Gordon. When I heard Gordon's voice, I was wondering what he was saying or thinking about me, but at this point, I didn't care as I fell asleep. For the past few days, I was spending my days in my room, reading books miserably or trying to get some sleep. I never felt this low for years, and this feeling wasn't that pleasant. I tried my best to motivate myself by cleaning the house or cooking dinner, but every task I did felt so tiring as my mind was all over the place, as I still couldn't move on from the accident. I even began to eat less as I lost my appetite. Even though many tried to console me, nothing made me feel better, and what's more, Gordon didn't talk to me as he felt better and went back to Poly Express for both day and night. This made me feel worse as I thought that Gordon was disappointed at me, and whenever I saw him, he would only give me a worried look, but from my point of view, I thought he was furious at me. I knew that I was failure. I'm a failure. However, on the 7th day since the incident, I got a call from my boss that my engine was repaired and that Henry will fetch my engine so that he could bring it back and that tomorrow I could start my work again. Just hearing that news didn't change my mood as I felt so tired and depressed. I knew that when I'm back to work, everyone would talk about me, and it would yell negative stuff about me. So when I saw Henry returning my engine, he asked if I was all right. But I lied by saying that I was okay and that I was eager to return back to work. What I didn't know that Henry noticed my behavior and he had a plan to help me. That evening, I was home alone as everyone were either working for night shift or they would return home very soon. There, I was laying on the sofa as I fixated on the ceiling. Luckily, James and Thomas's cat Domino jumped onto my lap as he began to purr. This made me gun up as I looked at the friendly cat with a gentle smile as I patted him. Having animals did make me feel somewhat better, as animals are very empathetic, and they are fully aware when someone wasn't feeling well. As I patted Domino while sighing, I heard the door open as I turned my head. To my surprise, I saw Gordon and his cobalt blue eyes shine as his jet black hair looked neat and sharp. I did blush for a moment by his presence, but I went back to focus on Domino, hoping that he didn't notice me. However, this wasn't the case as Gordon approached me and asked, "Hey, are you okay?" When I heard him ask that question, that me gasped suddenly as I hadn't got any words from Gordon for a week. and I was surprised that he was concerned about me. However, I gave him a fake smile and replied weakly, I'm fine. However, when I looked at him with the fake smile sat upon my lips, Gordon's cobalt blue eyes frowned his eyebrows as he gave me a small frown. This made me feel pathetic, as I knew I was terrible at lying. Therefore, I tried to avoid eye contact as I looked away while Domino hopped off and walked away. I prayed that Gordon wouldn't say anything, as I thought he would shout at me. No, we are not, he said, sadly, and he sat on the couch next to me, despite there was a space between us. Please, tell me what's wrong. When he asked, I blinked my eyes a couple of times as I felt tears were about to escape from my eyes as I slowly turned my head towards him. There, I saw him with a concerned look as I knew that Gordon was gently worried about me. With that, I felt like my bottle of emotions was about to blow as tears rolled down my eyes very fast as I wailed, I'm such a failure! What? He gasped in horror as his eyes went wide. Without thinking, I went towards him as I hugged him while crying. I felt so emotional that I didn't consider on Gordon's response. This made him gasp in surprise as he tried to soothe me. Shh, there. You're not a failure, he assured me as I felt his arms around me. This made me blush in a moderate shade of pink as I tried to calm myself. Yes, I am, I tried. I caused some of the passengers to get hurt when I tried to put my brakes on, but the wheel slipped. Rebecca, Gordon spoke softly, but I cut off his sentence. And I heard some horrible comments. I knew that I failed the railway and everyone here. I continued to explain my problem. Rebecca, Gordon spoke a bit more sternly. And now I can never forgive myself. How did I work on this railway in the first place? I failed our boss, the passengers, and However, before I could say anything else, Gordon spoke more sternly. Rebecca! Listen to me. This made me quiet altogether, as I looked deeply into his eyes, as he looked at me with a sad look upon his face, and he ground a piece of cloth from his pocket as he told me to blow it. There, I thanked him quietly as I blew my nose and wiped my remaining tears. Once I started to calm down, he looked at me and explained everything. Rebecca, when I found out on what had happened, I was horrified, as I thought something had bad happened to you and everyone else. You have no idea that when I heard you crying when I was in my room, I couldn't stop worrying about you, as me and the others were hoping that you'd be all right. The only reason why I didn't talk to you was because things were very busy, and the Fat Controller tried to help the passengers that made complaints. When I heard his kind yet concerned voice, this made me feel safe, as I knew he was such a caring friend deep inside. As I was still hugging him, he continued, In the end, it wasn't your fault. As the signal was faulty, and good thing that you didn't crash into Henry. You should feel lucky that everyone is still alive, and that you warned Henry in time. I know that your engine's wheels did play a part in it, but again, it's not your fault. With him trying to console me made me feel a bit better as I sniffed. Thanks, Gordon, but if I go back to work, everyone will refuse to go on a ride with me pulling the coaches. Nonsense, Gordon replied as he gave me a gentle smile. Accidents happen all the time, and those rude passengers aren't worth focusing on. In fact, you were a hero on that day as you warned Henry on time. This made me try not to blush, but I failed miserably, and I looked at him with glistening yellow eyes from the remaining tears as I thanked him. When I thanked him, this made him feel happy as I stuttered, I'm glad that we're friends, Gordon. With that, Gordon looked at me with a bit of wide eyes as he blushed a nice shade of pink, as he then gave me a gentle smile and replied, That's what friends do. Ever since that day, I began to slowly feel better, and I did take another week off as my boss understood my problem. Once I felt better, I went back to my job, but this time, my engine was good as new, with no faults, and I felt like my cheery side has returned. And everyone was happy to see me again at the railway, as everyone was glad that I was all right. However, what made me happy the most was that I have such a caring friend who supported me, despite his own flaws. I knew that someday I might confess my true feelings, but until then, I still need to recover from the trauma, and I should be thankful that I have supportive friends and a caring boss. In the end, I love working for the Northwestern Railway, as this will be my forever home.